Shirley Turner was like, and she wrote, "You'll have this much time."
Good afternoon, everybody.
More time.
Thank you so much for joining us. Before I spill all the water on the floor, it's 100 and something here in Phoenix today. So I want to thank you. What's wrong with it? It's got a dent. I'm going to have to hold it, right? Okay. Thank you, live audience, for coming to join us this afternoon. Thank you, authors who have been bravely changing flights and overcoming air travel. And thank you all, virtual audience, for watching us. So David has been here before. He was with us to sign his first Culling book, The Jewel and the Crown, which I absolutely loved.
Which was nominated for...
No, you have to use the mic. Sorry.
which was nominated for Best First Novel with the Edgar Awards.
That's right. I was just getting to that. Yep.
I'll shut my mouth.
No. No, I was actually delighted, because when I pick books way far in advance, I'm always pleased when, other people then validate whatever it was that I thought about the book. So, Karen, maybe that will be an omen for you.
That would be very nice.
Yep. So, Karen has written earlier books, but not mystery. I hope I have that right.
That's right, but just one book,
Just one.
but
okay.
not a mystery. This is
So
my
she's
first mystery.
actually our first mystery pick for June. David was our historical fiction pick, I think, last year. But it was also your first novel.
Published, yes. First published novel.
First published novel, right. So we're here to talk about two books that are set in England, one in the war and one contemporary. How should we start? Should we do this alphabetically? What do you think? All right, we'll do this alphabetically. Why not?
Okay.
The librarian in me says, always start at the top of the alphabet, which I love. So, Karen, what inspired you to write a mystery since this was your foray into the field?
Well, I wasn't planning to write a mystery. That's the main thing. I was inspired to write this book by a trip that I took by two things. By a trip that I took to the English countryside.
Okay.
I went with my sister on a trip to the English countryside, and I had been in London before, but I'd never been in the English countryside. And I loved it, and I couldn't get over how everywhere I went and everything I did, I felt like I was in the pages of my favorite novels and mystery novels. Not like Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte and Agatha Christie and all the village murder mystery shows that I'd watched on BritBox and Masterpiece Mystery and all of that. And it put me in this very silly sort of mood. Like everything I did, I would be like, oh, there's church. Where's the vicar? Is he a good vicar or a bad vicar? And, walking through the moors, I felt like I was, Jane Eyre, like everything. And it just got me thinking about that. And then the thing that prompted me to write about it was I was there for a week. And I did not plan to write anything about it. It was just vacation. When I came home, a novel I had written went on submission. Very different kind of novel. I worked as a journalist in Russia for many years in the 90s, and this novel drew on that experience. And I was finishing it up around the time when Russia invaded Ukraine, and it just made my novel feel very anachronistic because events had changed so much and nobody wanted anything Russian at all. Even though my novel was about Americans in Russia in 2017 and the 90s, it just was a bad novel for that time. And I was nervous about publishing it. And we sent it out to a bunch of editors, and they, lovely rejection notices, if that's not an oxymoron. And my agent said, do you want to revise it? Do you want to keep trying? Or do you want to set it aside? And I said, I want to set it aside. And the whole experience of writing that novel was not a lot of fun. I had second novel syndrome. Can I do this again? I had sold my first novel very quickly and very well. And then I also felt pressure to sort of make something of those years in Russia. This was my Russian novel. So I was very disappointed, but it ended up being kind of liberating because I felt like if I'm going to write another novel, spend a couple years writing a novel that now I know viscerally, not just intellectually, might not sell because I hadn't experienced that before, it had to be something fun. And I just thought, well, I had so much fun in England, and I thought so much about how we see the world through the shows we've seen and the books we've read, and I thought I want to play with that, and that's what inspired Welcome to Murder Week.
Got it. So it's kind of an idyllic England, right?
Yeah,
I know,
definitely.
definitely.
Yeah,
So the
definitely.
whole village kind of
Yeah.
a thing. I before I moved to Arizona in a transition in my life when I was just a little under 50, I spent 6 months in England, and I did the whole thing.
Oh,
I went
nice.
to every cathedral. I mean, literally every cathedral, every country house I could find. Some of them you go through as a tourist. Some of them you can actually stay in because that's how they keep going. And the whole thing, from all the way from Land's End in Cornwall to John O'Groats in Scotland, I actually drove it in my little car.
Nice.
I know. When Diana writes Outlander, I say to her, I've been there. I've been there in my little car on that little, little road, the whole thing, where single lane, so you have to pull off to pass the whole 9 yards. And I understand that because, I fell for the whole thing, too. So why not relive it?
Yeah. Although the initial plan wasn't even a mystery. I mean, I really didn't plan to write a mystery. And I like reading mysteries, but I'm not a fanatic mystery reader. My initial plan was to send some members of a writing group to the English countryside because I like the idea of taking a group of people that have something in common, but not in their everyday lives, different ages, different backgrounds. And I told a friend this new idea for a novel. It's going to be so fun. I'm going to send a group of Americans, writers, a writing group to the English countryside. And she said, okay, what are they going to do there? And then I thought, oh, yeah, they're going to write. That's going to be really boring. And then I thought up this idea of that they would solve a fake murder mystery. And then I eventually brought a true family mystery into it. But I had never done such a thing, and I didn't know if I could pull it off.
Well, it's interesting because when I started out reading the book Cold Turkey, I thought it was going to be like a super cozy. And then there was, there's a young woman living in Buffalo whose life is not what she loves. She's in optometry, or she's an ophthalmologist, optician, right? Not even an ophthalmologist, right? I know you have to. There's a difference,
she
right?
fits people for glasses and sells glasses,
right? And she lives in Buffalo. I know, which is a climate reverse problem from where we are. I understand that they may be forcing Buffalo to build an enclosed football stadium. This came up at brunch this morning. And I said, will they ever do that in Green Bay? And no. The whole Packers experience is to freeze to death in Green Bay, but apparently not in Buffalo. Anyway, her mother dies, right?
Yes, her estranged mother dies.
And her mother has been, I love that British term, David, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Her mother is a bolter.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, which basically means a woman who walks away from her life, from her children, from her husband. There have been some really classic bolters over time. So her mom has not been very present in her life. Her mom's a bolter. And when she dies, she has left behind. This is your story, but I'm telling it.
You're doing fine.
I know.
I've said it quite a few times.
Right. And she finds there are 2 tickets her mom has bought to a village fundraiser, which is the murder weekend. There's a new novel. There's a new novel out, which I just picked for our British Mystery Club for this month, which is about a mystery writers weekend in a village in England. There are many parallels to it really is, but writers, when they get together, terrible things happen. And when they're not actually writing, they're competing. And I couldn't help but think again of the idea. But I think your idea of a fundraiser for the village, staging like a week-long contest, was a great idea.
Trying to bring tourists to the village. So I modeled it on the village of Bakewell, where I stayed with my sister, which is absolutely
the best tarts in the whole world.
Yes,
right.
Very good food. And but I made up a village because there's no way I could write about a real village. So I called it Willowthrup, and the idea was that they were in the Peak District, but they didn't have all the attractions of like a special church or a special tart or something that would bring tourists. So they needed to do this to bring tourists. So they marketed to the BritBox fanatics among us to come sort of play act a murder mystery. And then while they're there, my group, Cath and her 2 cottage mates, solve the fake mystery, and they also solve the real mystery of why her mother wanted them to go.
Right.
So
And
it's
so the
two
book,
stories.
but the book gets much deeper, I won't say darker, but definitely deeper. Plus, there's a romance. Plus, there's it's just got it all. I had so much fun reading it, and I don't really think it's classifiable.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because when we were putting the novel out on submission, there were a couple editors who were like, I really like this, but I don't know what it is. I'm not sure would I market it as this or that. And then my editor who bought the book, she said, I love it because it's this and that. And I could see it being sold as a mystery or as a romance or as a mother-daughter grief, loss story, etc. And maybe because I'm not a mystery writer, I wasn't thinking about genre when I wrote it. I just kind of wrote the book that I wanted to read at that
Well,
time.
but that's
So,
also why I liked it, because I really dislike the categorization,
yeah,
which
I do
has been
too.
accelerated by online book selling because of the tags that have to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
assigned to everything. And excuse me, I like it much more when you can go into a book and be surprised. You know, be surprised how it develops, be surprised by the story. Now, that was also true when I read A Jewel in the Crown, and I had some trouble, David, deciding you have to pick up the microphone now if we're going to talk. Right. I had some trouble trying to figure out how I wanted to talk to people about it. So, when you wrote it, what was your basic intent? You've written other kinds of things, and you have a background in film, right?
Yeah, I was a director of photography my whole life
Right.
in Hollywood. So I shot movies, television commercials, music videos. I'm sorry about those. And so I think visually.
Right. No, I could
Yeah.
I could definitely
Yeah.
see that you did. I mean, we rolled from one fabulous action scene to another in A Jewel in the Crown. We wound up from Scotland going to Lisbon, and we started out somewhere else. And what interested you in making Katrine not only a Welsh policewoman but a socialist, and then you made her work with an aristocrat who she rebelled against the entire book?
Oh, well, that's my background. I come
What, you're the socialist or the
Oh, yeah.
aristocrat?
I'm not. I come from a Welsh coal mining town, and we're all very strong socialists. And I think I mentioned this a lot. And we're talking about this book, not A Jewel in the Crown, right?
No, I was talking first about A Jewel in the
Oh,
Crown,
okay.
because I would like people who haven't read it now to be
Gotcha,
so
gotcha.
interested that they're
Yeah.
going to rush out and buy it.
I mentioned it last year. The thing is that it's basically my mother, because my grandfather was a coal miner, Irish, couldn't write. My grandmother was this size and made of concrete. She was a wonderful woman. They had 14 kids. My mother was the one in the middle, and she was sent away when she was 14 to work as a downstairs maid in a hotel. And she had to send the money back to keep the other kids at school, at home. And it bent her personality because she was only a kid. You know, and when I started working on this Catherine Corinne story, I kept thinking, who is she? Who is she? And I thought, well, it's pretty goddamn obvious. It's your mother. Give her the chance to have the life that she never had. So she was the brightest of the family, and with me, she would come out and I'd get a little spark of energy, but otherwise she was very, very reserved because she had been battered around as a kid. And I thought, she's going to get to do every goddamn thing that she wants to do. And so that's Cajun, short, red-headed, feisty, and very, very opinionated.
Yes, she is, and she's an unlikely person to be paired with. I'm trying to remember his name.
Lord Hector.
Thank you. I couldn't. I mean, names are hard for me as I'm getting older all the time. And they, it's an unlikely alliance. But why did you decide to call this series the Churchill Files, which I think is a great name for it?
Because I thought it was brilliant. No, that's a lie. It wasn't my idea.
Okay.
It was those sophisticated folks back in New York said, let's call them the Secret Churchill Files.
That's because it was a recognizable name.
I get that.
Of course it was,
Winston.
right. But
Yeah.
does Winston actually have anything to do with the assignment?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
He does, right?
I should, let me just back up. I just finished the 7th in the series, which is the last one. There are 7. No more. I'm sick of them. And Winston is in every one.
Okay.
In fact, in Winston of Arabia, he ends up tear-assing around North Africa on a camel, helping Catherine fix the bad guys.
I can see him doing that. He was a
Yeah.
rebel. But he gets into this first one because what's at stake are the British crown jewels. That's why it's called a jewel
Yes.
in the crown. And they were, lots of important stuff was sent to Canada. And I think I've been to see it actually, the bank in Toronto.
All the bullion.
Yeah,
of the Bank of
exactly.
England
It was
sent.
shipped off to Canada, managed to escape those North Atlantic convoys, and was held there during the war. So the idea of sending the crown jewels from the tower to Toronto, or no, rather Montreal. Was it? No, it was Montreal. Not
Montreal.
it was Montreal, not
Yeah.
Toronto. Sorry. Was a great idea, I thought, for your book.
And also, it didn't happen. I discovered after I finished the book, because I did all kinds of research and I couldn't find out what happened to them. And then I discovered that the real ones were stuffed into a biscuit tin and buried out 20 feet underground below Windsor Castle, which is kind of prosaic. I like my idea much better. Yeah.
Yeah, but the other one's so British. Put them in a biscuit
true.
tin and bury them. No, it really is.
That's
I mean, well, there were a lot of things that ended up actually in Welsh coal mines. Much of the National Gallery, I
Mhm.
think,
And the slate
they
mines.
moved the art to the Welsh coal mines. Those of you might have read All the Light We Cannot See. I got it right. Yay. Which was about what happened with the Louvre. And many of the treasures from the Louvre were sent to Saint Malo. So the idea was to get them out of the most immediate danger zone, either London or Paris, and hope that the Nazis, the German army, didn't get to either place. I think they did get to Saint Malo, but they obviously never made it to Wales.
Yeah.
Right. So, what is the concept now that we've covered Jewel in the Crown, which is still one of my totally favorite books? And, I wanted to describe as like a female James Bond, and she sort of is, but then that's kind of unfair, too.
Well, in this one, she actually meets Ian Fleming.
Yes, she does. Yep.
And I just wanted to poke him because to show how feisty she is, because he was working for naval intelligence, and she's sent down there because naval intelligence wants to take over Churchill's little secret agency. So she's sent down to basically run cover. So she walks into Ian Fleming's office, Commander Fleming, and he doesn't even look up. He's working at his desk and he's smoking his pipe. And she just says, "You see the shape of me? It'll be gone in 10 seconds. And he wakes up and apologizes. And then he reads her dossier, and he says, "You've had an incredible background. This will make a wonderful novel." And he said, "What's your name?" And as she's being taught, she lies, and she says, "Brand, Jane Brand." And he says, "I might use that." And so she really is the instigator of James Bond.
Doesn't she even have like a 007
Oh, yes,
designation?
yes.
I'm pretty sure I remember the remember the 007 part.
Her official number is something like 37-007.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. So she's not quite as promiscuous as Jane. Well, I don't know that. I've only read 2 books. Maybe she really has more action as we move along. But I mean, that's one of the things you have to think about with James Bond. Was a girl.
Yeah.
Any of you who've read Stuart Woods and have read his Stone Barrington series, it's the same thing. It's like, or Travis McGee was the same thing too. Kind of, serial womanizer, new woman, every book, every adventure, whatever. Right. So, anyway, lots of action in this book. I thought it was darker. Did you?
Yeah, because we're getting farther into the war, and the whole idea of honor and glory is wearing off, and now we're getting bombed to pieces here. Yeah. And people are dying in great numbers. And also, she's only 23, 24. She's still a kid, but she's growing up fast too. The idea that wars in the past were always fought over there, but now they're coming here.
Right. Lots of parallels to the Ukraine, right? Does he need his microphone up higher? I know. I'm trying.
I feel like I'm drunk on a bar stool.
Lean on the table. Right. There we go.
Okay.
And, this is interesting you're talking about the Russian book, because that's basically what they're doing in the Ukraine. It's the same kind of war of attrition that the Nazis, fought on London. So everything new is coming. I mean, everything from the 1930s in many ways is coming around again. So.
May I mention something that I loved about this book? This is a lovely book, by the way. I'm so happy to hear that you went to England, because your descriptions of the countryside are just wonderful.
Peak District is
Well,
gorgeous.
from you,
Yes,
I'm glad to
yes.
hear that.
Well,
Because
you know, the reason I take was what stopped me short was we're talking about the bluebells, because years ago I shot a movie in the Isle of Man. If you don't know where that is, don't worry, I didn't either. But I'm told it's miles away from the Virgin Islands. But it is,
South England, come on.
what?
The Isle of Man.
But we were shooting in this old country estate, and I go around this corner and into this woods, and there's nothing but bluebells. And as a kid, I used to pick them and take them home in armfuls for my mom. You can't do that now because they're protected.
yeah, they're protected. Right?
Yeah, but your descriptions were really perfect.
Oh,
Absolutely
well,
perfect.
thank you. I mean, one of the things that was nice about the fact that I was writing about Americans and their views of England, I thought, well, if I get it wrong, they're Americans, they're stupid, so maybe they're getting it wrong.
No, but I do think that is the way to approach, writing a book set in another country, is to
Yeah.
have your point of view character somebody like you who is
Yeah,
not a
exactly.
native. There's been a lot of controversy over the years about Americans who writing.
Yeah, I
English
mean, my husband
mystery.
is a journalist, and there have been a lot of controversy about cultural appropriation, and he kept, saying to me, "I don't know, you're appropriating the Brits. Is that going to be a problem?" And I was like, "I'm actually making more fun of the Americans and their view of the Brits, and what they think is real versus fictional."
Well, but I agree with David. I've been in the Peak Country quite a lot, and it's really wild, and it's
Yeah, it's beautiful.
yeah, the Peak Country and the Lake Country are probably the two
Yeah.
most,
From the Scottish Highlands.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
but I was staying
Yeah.
in England, right, where nature is ruggeder. There's
Yeah, and
fewer people.
surprisingly, not a lot of Americans travel there. And we were there in October 22, so it was right after the pandemic. But it was the strangest experience to be in England and have people say, "Where are you from?" And when we said the United States, they would be like, "Oh, wow!" Like usually you travel places, and there are too many American tourists everywhere. But I think Americans go to London, and they go to Wimbledon, or they go close to London. We didn't see any Americans when we were there, which made it kind of fun.
So it's a good thing you sent a few. So in her quarter in Willowthorpe, I love the name. I think Willowthorpe's a great name. They're shared accommodations because it's a small village. So if you have all these people coming, there's no Ritz-Carlton or anything. So she has housemates.
Yes.
And so you really developed a whole found family
Yeah.
idea. It isn't just her story. It's actually three of them.
Yeah, it's three of them, and they're very different. So the main character who narrates the book is from her perspective is Cath. She's 34 and single and wants to say single, she thinks. And then there's Wyatt, who's 40, and he works unhappily in his husband's birding store in New Jersey. And his husband has sent him on this trip, and he thinks his husband has sent him to get rid of him for a while. And he's a real mystery lover. And then there's Amity, who's 50, and she's recently divorced. Her husband has left her. This is her first solo trip, and she's a romance writer who's suffering from writer's block, very specific one. She can't bring her protagonists together after they fall in love and they split up the way they always do in romance novels. She can't bring them back together. So the three of them are very different, and I really enjoyed giving them, like, Cath's is the main story, and they're all involved in solving the mystery of why her mother wanted to go, but I enjoyed giving the other characters an arc as well, so that they end up in a different place at the end of the week as well.
I have to say that in many ways, my favorite character is the one we never actually see in the book. He's the husband left at home.
Oh, really?
The one, yeah. I
Interesting.
mean, you don't really know.
What, the husband of Wyatt, not
Yes.
the ex-husband.
No, the husband of
the birding store.
the
You want-
birding store.
Oh, yeah, nice man.
Yeah, no, I know, but he's yeah.
He's a good guy.
He is
Yeah.
a good guy, and I really, sorry in a way not to meet him.
You may see more of him in another
Oh,
book.
good, right. So that was a question I was going to ask you, since I already know that David's written 7 books in this series. Oh, joy.
Wow.
So we have them to look forward to. Were you thinking that these characters could go on, or were you
I wasn't
thinking?
thinking it when I started. I mean,
No.
this was such new territory for me
Right.
to write a mystery at all. But I really had a lot of fun with the characters, and I'm working on a second novel that is narrated from by Amity, and it continues her story, and Wyatt will appear in it, and Cath's just a tiny little bit. So,
Aha,
yeah, that's the plan.
very clever.
It's kind of
Right.
scary to do a sequel, though. Don't you worry about people thinking, like, the first one was great, but that second one, I don't know. No? You don't worry? Okay,
It's
I'll
not my
adopt
job.
that.
My job is just to sit
Well,
down and write.
That is true.
There's actually a very well-known phenomenon which discussed over the years with it. It is called second book syndrome.
Oh yeah, I had that. It was
And,
my Russian novel.
Yeah, well, but it's also that if a first novel is really captivates people and is successful, there's always, will the second one let them down? Will it be disappointing?
Yeah.
It's hard for the reader and it's hard for the author, and generally sales dip for book
Yeah.
two.
Well, I have 6 years between, so I'm hoping that
Right, but then, no, the good part is that after they do that, if the second book is in any way comparable to the first book, then they start going up, and then
Okay, I
there's an
like that.
upward trajectory to a series. I've watched it over the years. It reminds me when I was an undergraduate looking at statistical theory, and there's this kind of bell-shaped curve thing that you have to
Yeah.
learn if you do statistics. I hated them. But anyway, it's not uncommon for authors and readers, I might say, to have lots of nervous moments
Yeah.
about sequels. So it's interesting that to hear from you, because most often I hear from readers, not from authors, about it. Right. So clearly, if you had a good time, then it'll
I
be.
did. I just want to continue, and it was, it was a combination of the sort of getting over the slog of the second novel that really went down because it wasn't published. It was getting over that, and then also there was just so much turmoil in the world, and it was just nice to escape to this world of the novel. I really enjoyed that.
My reading has either been escape to, or in your case, actually winning a fight,
Yeah.
winning the war. Always a good side, right? Right. So, David, did you have apparently not any trepidation writing this book, A Beacon in the Night? After no. None for the sequels, the 5 remaining books.
No, I just love it because I can pick up the threads, strengthen the weak parts from the first book, and then build on it.
Right.
No, it's I just love it. I just want to mention something about this book, though, which I really liked. I always love when I read a new writer. There's always one thing in the book I think I'm going to steal that. That's really good. And if it's too good, you can't steal it because then they say, "Oh no, you didn't write that. She wrote that." But and this is also from experience. I've shot, and again, I apologize for it. I've shot more police procedurals where you walk into the detective's office and there's a wall and it's full of photographs of like the dead body or a dead duck.
Red string.
And there's this red string everywhere. And every time I looked at it, I said, that's bloody impossible. That is horrible. That doesn't make any sense to me. That makes it more difficult than if we just turn the pages in a book. And I love the fact that you nailed it. And I think the word you used was chaos.
Chaos, yeah. I mean, I had,
chaos.
yeah. I mean, the two characters, Wyatt and Amity, are such mystery enthusiasts. Then they're like, oh, we've got to get a board, like in those shows. And so they have one board for the fake mystery, and then they have another board for the real mystery, and they don't really know what they're doing. They're just sticking stuff up there and putting red string. And
Wow, the prevalence of BritBox and Acorn
Yeah.
is really going strong here.
definitely.
I know. I think we often, those of us who watch those things, think we are, right there in the au courant with the investigation, but we're actually not. So you chose in this book not to bring back, you've got Katrine, but you decided not to have her companion in the first book
The aristocrat.
playing a big
we
role.
I had to go around the houses with Kensington about this because they sent me the first advertising bump, and it said this incredible pair, the socialist and the aristocrat, and I said no, because it's always got to be her story.
He appears a little, though, right?
In the
'Cause
second
I'm
one, he
halfway
doesn't.
through it.
Does it?
This one, doesn't he? Doesn't she run into him somewhere?
I forget.
I think there's a little.
But if it is
It's
a
minor.
transitory
It's minor.
moment.
Yeah, he's
And
minor.
I think there's
You
one
know
of-
he's from her past.
I think in Winston's Women, which is the fourth one, I don't think he appears at all.
Right.
And he appears in the very end. But I know it's probably better for marketing, but it's got to be about her.
Yeah.
It's got to be about her, and you have to see her grow, and you have to be with her as she faces dangers. And I mean, why do they still make James Bond movies? I don't get it. I really don't get it.
It's been one of the most lucrative
Yeah.
franchises of all
Oh,
time. I know.
absolutely. But I sit there thinking, oh, like, never badmouth the product, but I mean, I'm tired of big guys with big muscles that smash their way through everything, and meanwhile they're dragging the little woman behind them, and you think, oh, come on, let's do something different. You know, this is the 21st century.
It's certainly true that women played some really significant and difficult roles in World War II. They started in World War One because there's so many men died. There weren't enough men to actually do a lot of the jobs.
Right.
And
right.
so it was ultimately liberating for British women, the war, although unfortunately, since most of the men died, many of them remained single all their lives and had to figure out
This is
how
a great
to.
story. It's
Yeah.
a wonderful story.
Well, I'm glad I wasn't of that generation, and but I do think that there is a tendency to think that war was all the guys, but it really wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a short. I wrote a novel called Sweetwater Silver about the American wasps, and you will know about them, David. These young women.
Women.
Yeah, the flowers.
And what the instructor said was, they are better pilots than the men because you can. I'm sorry to keep you up. Because they will listen. A man doesn't like to be instructed by another man. And when I was learning to fly, I had this young woman who was fabulous, and it was okay to make mistakes with her. So I think that's so much missed. I can get on the soapbox about this. I'm going to stop, but it's the lives lost. The women could have done so much more if they'd been allowed to. Yeah.
Right, and as war has become more mechanical, more technical, and so forth, that women can operate drones just as well as men can. So, it is definitely changing things. But that's an interesting idea. I think you have to make, because I sort of fell into the thought that the sequel would be the pair, and then you said to me, no, it's going to be Katrine, and I thought, okay.
And she doesn't solve the problems with a gun. No, put the gun down. Let's find a different way. I mean, she'll blow people away if she has to. But, and she's a great shot. And she carries this gigantic British revolver. But it's too easy to solve the problem with a gun. Okay, let's go and shoot him, fine, let's move on. It takes brains and smarts and intelligence to find another way out, and that's what I always wanted to have.
I also like, and I haven't finished it yet, but I also like that there's nothing, she's funny, she's witty, she's smart, but there's nothing cartoonish about it. Like, you gave her some real grief. Like, I mean, she's grieving in that way. That's very un-James Bond. It's more serious than that.
Yeah.
I thought it was really added a good dimension to it.
So, a character we haven't mentioned in your book is the young man in the village.
The gin distiller.
Well, there's
Kind
several.
of dreamy, right?
Yeah, there's several. There's several. Interesting people in the village. I mean, we have the 3 Americans who
Yes.
have come to Murder Weekend, but we have some real characters in the village. One of whom is kind of, classically in the village. The old woman behind the.
Oh yeah, the nosy.
The nosy neighbor.
Yeah.
She's kind of a classic. But
and the vicar.
yeah, and the vicar. Yeah, well, of course we could possibly
it was
have.
fun.
Has to have a vicar in the village, right? But anyway, the young man, I thought he was a lovely character.
Yeah, I liked him. It's funny how things happen in writing, your sort of subconscious works that, I'm having fun writing this fake mystery, and then there's this more serious mystery. And then it's just like all these things with mothers and children in it, that he's living in the village. He used to live in London, but his mother is from the village, and he's taking care of her. She has dementia, and that my character has an issue with her mother. And there's just a lot of mother things in there, things that sort of, I'm a mother, my mother has the beginnings of dementia. I didn't plan to write about these things, but it's always fascinating to me how they slip in.
Well, I mean, do you think that most writers have a certain autobiographical element to their stories?
I don't know. I do. This story is not autobiographical at all in terms of it's probably the least autobiographical thing I've written. My first novel, the character was more like me, even though the plot was very fictional. This one was really, I would have thought it wasn't, but then things do slip in. I mean, you've got to write from somewhere. You write from your own experiences, your own emotions. So I'm thinking about these characters, but I think they all have a little bit of me in them.
Well, that's really what I meant. I
Yeah.
didn't mean it was necessarily your
Yeah.
life,
Yeah,
but
I think,
but
I
your
mean,
own psyche, your own emotional,
Totally.
and you know
Yeah.
whatever emotional experiences you have are what
Yeah.
you get to draw on.
Yeah.
That's why I'm always suspicious when there's like a 20-year-old wonder, who's written a classic book or something, and I give there's
Yeah.
not enough
Like, where
life
did it come
experience
from?
there, to
Yeah.
really mind. Having said that, Michael Carito is one of my favorite authors, and that Resch wrote his first book when he was 20 or 21. It was great. So, there are exceptions. But generally, I think writers need some life
Yeah,
experiences.
when I was working on my first novel, I was in a writing class in New York at the 92nd Street Y, and I just had a bunch of different things, like quirky little details in the story. And there was a woman who was about 25 in the class, and I was in my 50s, early 50s at the time, and she looked at something that was in the story. She said, "How do you come up with these things?" And I was like, "I've lived a little." Like, you get to your 50s, you have some material to draw on.
Absolutely true. So, David, you spent a lot of time in photography, films, and all the rest of it. Are you drawing, because you're writing other things since you are such a quick writer? What else are you writing, and what are you drawing on?
One thing, first of all, about this thing about writing from your background, is Virginia Woolf was asked about that, and she said, "Yes, it's my autobiography, but it's not about me."
Yeah, that's
And I find that
exactly it.
my first couple of books, which I thank God unpublished, I can see I'm in it, but there's no trace of me now. My experiences, yes,
Yeah.
but otherwise, no, I don't exist. I'm writing a story I've been longing to do for years. Being a kid in Wales, there were 4 movie houses in my town, and they changed programs in the middle of the week, so you could go to a different movie every night. I knew more about America by the time I was 10 than anything else. I was always coming to America to be a cowboy. And I've always been fascinated by Custer's Last Stand. And what's interesting is when I speak to my American friends, how little they know about Custer. They know about the fact that he turned up uninvited at Little Bighorn. But what they don't know was that he was an incredible hero in the Civil War. When he was 23, 24, 25. And the more I got into it, the more I fell in love with his wife, Libby. And I thought, George is a bit of a twerp at the end of the day. But Libby, and again, it's this thing about a woman not being allowed to do what she could do nowadays. She created the Custer myth. He probably would have just vanished. But she lived for another 57 years, and she burnished and created the Custer superhero myth. Never remarried, ended up living in Park Avenue in New York. And
You're going to write about this?
I'm 250 pages in.
Wow, it sounds great.
The more I do it, the more I start questioning her motives, which is that she did that because that was all she was allowed to do. But what did she really think about George Armstrong Custer? In those little quiet moments, did she feel like, son of a bitch? He's off there galloping around. I'm sitting in the back of a wagon, getting shit and stupid. Start to find it more and more. And also the thing that, she was actually completely unaware of what was going on. Like Nancy Astor. On Nancy Astor's wedding night, she punched out her husband because she thought he was attacking her. Now, this is a woman who was very wealthy, came from a great family. She had no idea what was going on physically. And I thought, Libby wouldn't know. She came from Monroe, Michigan. She wouldn't know either. She would have no idea. George got the clap when he was in West Point and was sterile. He never told his wife. So being the woman and the inferior, she went through a whole life thinking that it was her fault, that they couldn't have children, that somehow he was this wonderful manly man, and she was the woman who failed him. And I thought, I'm on a mission to resurrect Libby Custer. I really want her to. That's the same way I did with my mom. I really want her to be shown for who she is. Back on my bloody soapbox again, sorry. But I mean, she's fascinating. Good looking, smart as a whip.
Are you going to have time in the remainder of your life to write all the stories
how
that
fast
you
are
want to
you?
write?
How long does it take you to write?
I'm only 36. I look older.
How long does it
Stop
take you
it.
to write a book?
Well, first of all, and I sound like a poor man's Stephen King, I write every day. I write every
And
day.
so how long did it take to write this one?
10 weeks.
Are you kidding me? And then revising? Like
Excluding
before
research.
how long to the whole thing? Research, writing, revising before you send it into your editor? I don't know why I'm asking this. It's going to make me feel bad.
I've heard it before, so I'm not quite as astonished as you are.
I think either I have a real dumb editor and a really dumb copy editor, but my stuff seems to sail through.
So what's the total time it takes you to finish it? 10 weeks to finish it with the research?
It's hard to split it up because I'm researching for everything
Okay.
all the time. But then when I lock in, it's every day. I mean, it's not that difficult. It's only 350 pages.
Okay.
Well, he's not alone. There have been some other authors. Brett Battles, who is currently writing the Stone Barrington books, quit his wonderful thriller series because his publisher would only let him publish one book a year, and he wrote like 5. And so he decided, before it was easy to do it, that he would self-publish. And I mean, those were really wonderful books. I love, some people can just do that, and some people are really slow. I mean, our, star author here at the bookstore takes years. So it just depends on the author's process, all the rest of it. And also, how quickly you can research what you are interested in. I mean, you already know with Katrine, you already know about whales, you already know all of that sort of background. And at the whatever age you started, 23, you probably already knew a lot about World War II. So
Yeah, because your descriptions of London and the bombing and everything are so good and so visceral.
I was born a couple of months after the war ended. There's no connection.
Yeah.
But that was it. So I grew up my first 7 or 8 years. I remember rationing, and I remember looking back now. I remember that I hate the word poor, but we were pretty much poor working class. The outdoor toilet, no hot water. The clothesline outside, and then when it rained, you had the clothesline inside, so we all got bronchitis from the damp clothes. But what a great childhood.
I mean, I can see that you could write this series fairly quickly, but clearly to write about Libby Custer, you really have to spend
Maybe
some
20
serious
weeks.
research time.
But there's a whole lifetime of books.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lifetime of reading books. I do have a question for you, though.
Yep.
When people ask me about writing characters, I don't know if you do this. When I start writing characters, I always give them a birthday. Because I say, look, I have a birthday, they should have one too. Because if they have a birthday, then to me they're much more real.
Never done it.
You and I will talk.
Does it help you remember how old they are too? If you
Well, yeah, particularly when it's serious, because you think, no, wait, it's like that, it's the butler in the pantry with a duck. Okay, I could never play Clue. I was terrible at it.
Part of the reason I think I don't do it is that I don't really plot things out before I go. Except for in the fake mystery of this, I sort of had to. But so I've had to sort of change their ages as I go. And I'm like, oh, wait, I want the mother to have been this age when this happened, and she had a child at this age. So I'm always sort of adjusting their ages. So I would just have to keep changing their birth date, which would get complicated.
Well, I think with historical fiction, you have to. I do a big, long, like an 8-10 foot long timeline, because I have to know who is where. When.
Yeah, and you're putting it in between real
It's
events.
like,
I'm not.
I'm
not
shooting
doing that.
one movie where there's a big, at the end, everyone gets together in a nightclub and they're all dancing, and I said, we killed that guy 10 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
And they had to sort of reshoot it and pull him out.
Yeah, I don't have to do that, but as a former journalist, I'm very picky about making sure that the real things that I write about are accurate. So my village is made up, so I didn't have to worry about, someone saying, no, that street goes the other way. But my characters are roaming around the Peak District, and they're going to real places, and there are real anecdotes in there. And as a journalist, I just, have to get that right. I hate it when you're reading a book and there's something
Yeah.
wrong, even if it's tiny. It just makes you not trust the author. It just pulls you out of the story. So
I'm trying to decide if I can copyright a new cozy called The Butler in the Pantry with a Duck.
I don't.
I think you can.
As long as you send me a quarter every time you use it, that's okay.
I want to suggest that as a new cozy.
You see,
It's perfect.
It's a good time.
I don't believe in God, but there is a God because only God would invent a duck. First of all, think of the name, duck.
It makes me wonder because when we were in France, one of the last month when we did traveling, one of the hotels I've always wanted to stay in is a very, very famous hotel in Nice called the Le Negresco. And they had just renovated the suite that they gave us on the top floor with balconies looking over the Promenade des Anglais, the whole bit. It was great. But we had dinner in there. They have a Michelin restaurant in the hotel. And my husband is a traveler who calls ahead to Michelin restaurants for reservations. That's part of the fun for him. So we're sitting there in the dining room in this elegant hotel and all, and there's this weird-looking metal thing on a tray. I mean, on a table, its own table. This is a restaurant where the wine list is so big it has its own table, and they have to roll the table up because you can't actually pick up the wine list. It's a book. But anyway, here's this silver thing, and I could see Rob was trying to figure out what it was the whole bit. And I thought to myself, I know what this is. I absolutely do, because years ago I actually saw one before, and it was a duck, and it's the same thing that they have at the Tour d'Argent, which is world famous for its pressed duck.
Right.
So now I'm thinking that if we could take the duck press and the butler
in the pressed
pantry,
duck?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm working this out. I'm going to go away from
Maybe we
this.
should go write this.
I know. It was so perfect. Anyway, do you all have questions you'd like to ask while I recover my equilibrium here? Yes.
Yeah, so for both of you, especially when you're now writing multiple of the same timeline, multiple books, or even when you start a book and the end of the book, there's always those characters that are mentioned and then all of a sudden they're later on in the book. And how do you keep track of even just the name? I mean, are you chronologically writing like on the side, like everybody's names and who they're related to and whatnot? Because you think at some point, I mean, we read a lot, you start going, oh, I remember that. Now I'm having to flip back in the book and remember who the heck it was sometimes.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm just curious how you guys keep track of all of the.
Well, I said I have it's between 6 and 10 feet long, a timeline, like a spreadsheet with the characters' names down the left-hand side, and then the dates, and any particular things like Pearl Harbor. Oops, put that in so that I have an idea of the history. And then I just draw a line through it, and when somebody gets 86th, then I stop the line, so I know that he or she died at that point. So I can look, and again, it's back to like the age. I also put in, if I'm working in years, in the upper right-hand corner, the age of each person. There's a guy whose name I completely blanked on, Martin, it'll come roaring back to me, who wrote biographies of Winston Churchill. And I love his work because on every page he puts Winston's age at that time. So I don't have to sort of go back and say, how old was Winnie? It's just right there. And that kind of thing, and I'm not an organized guy, but I had to do it because the thing you mentioned, I forget people. And that way I really get to see the story laid out. And also I make sure I don't have names which are similar.
Which is a really important
I've
thing.
done that,
Yeah.
and then I've had to
Yeah.
change a name.
My last book is called All the Devils Are Here. And I used this Welsh name for a horse at the beginning and a hero at the end. And I thought, oh, bugger. So I had to email my agent and say, take out that name, call him Fred, and we'll keep this one. So it's really easy to do. But otherwise, I think it ends up being a pig's breakfast. You have no idea what's going on.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I'm dealing with a much smaller cast of characters. I mean, I have the three main characters and then maybe 2 or 3 others that are prominent. And but for the challenge for me more is working in a short time frame, because the whole story, well, most of the story takes place the week that they're in England. So I'm constantly like making little calendars for myself, so I make sure that I don't get mixed up. You know, sometimes I get to a draft and I'm like, oh my God, I have 2 Tuesdays, or something like that. So I write down what happens each day so that I can keep track.
I also think one of the most vibrant characters in your book is the mother, who in fact is dead, and she doesn't reappear as a ghost. But learning about the mother, she's a really vibrant character throughout the entire story. It's her story. Actually, in many ways, it's really her story.
Is her story. Yeah.
So I found that really a nice technique as well. Right. Anybody else have a question?
So, question for both of you. So, when you're plotting out your books or your story line, are you plotters? Are you pantsers? Do you, start out with a specific timeline of, this is gonna this is gonna happen within a week or a year or 5 years?
Very observant. Yeah, I mean, I've started out with the idea of a group of Americans are going to go to England, and once I knew they were going to participate in a murder week, I knew I had a week. I mean, there's stuff that happens before and after, but it's essentially a week. I am very much a pantser. This book, a little more, I did more plotting because I had to figure out the murder mystery part. And then once you get going and you're developing 2 mysteries, you kind of have to orchestrate things more. But I have found that I come up with much better ideas when I kind of let myself go and surprise myself. When I sit down and try to think up, what should I write about and who should the people be? It's generally not very good ideas. Which is maybe why it took me a year and a half to write it instead of 10 weeks.
David's writing his... David's writing historical fiction too, so there are more, you have to stay reasonably within the lines, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of fiction within the actual history, but otherwise you'd just be writing history and nonfiction, why bother,
Yeah, and also you have to it's a matter of leaving things out very often is more important. Like this one, A Beacon in the Night, is based on
David, microphone.
You think I'd know, right? The Blitz started by accident because the Germans mistakenly bombed London. They were told they were not to do it, but they did. And Winston got mad, so he went and bombed Germany and went back and forth, and away we go. And Hitler was so mad at it, he said, I want the Luftwaffe to bomb all of Britain's best buildings, all of their classical heritage, their castles and their cathedrals.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
And they had, there was a German travel guide called the Baedeker Guide, and that's what they used as a reference. Now, it happened to be the year after this, but so I sort of slid it back a little bit, and I didn't refer to the Baedeker raids very much, but it was that basic idea. So I think you're constrained by history, but at the same time you can shoot like a bandit. So
it's always surprising when you go to Europe and you recognize the things that did survive. I spent a week in Milan some years ago because I'd always wanted to see Daniel Barenboim and force myself to sit through the ring cycle, all of which I could do on this one trip. And the gorgeous cathedral in Milan, the Italians decided that they would just light it up every night. So instead of trying to disguise it or put it under netting or anything, they just spotlighted it, and nobody, neither the Allies nor the Germans, bombed it. So I think there were a lot of European treasures that survived the war for one reason or another.
yes.
And you're right that there was a vengeance thing going on in the UK, but there were things in Germany in return that were also.
Yes.
Hamburg was just flattened,
Yes. Dresden.
for example, in Dresden.
Yeah.
Right. I know. We went to visit Dresden, and they rebuilt, the palace and the green room, and And it feels old, but it's not
Yeah.
because it was destroyed. So there we are. It's hard to write about. At least we know how that war came out. We're in the middle of an era. We don't know how any wars are going to come out. And it's very unnerving. I mean, I always think about, I've said this before, Jane Austen was writing along in one of the longest wars in history, 20 years. 20 years between Napoleon and all the rest, and nobody knew how it would end until Waterloo. The afternoon, in fact, of the battle at Waterloo was the end of that war. And up until then, there we were. But, you know, people lived through it for 20 years. But as you point out, most of it was over there.
Yes.
You know, they weren't fighting on British soil. They were actually fighting on Portuguese soil for a great deal of it. So, yeah, I think that wars are far more present today in the sense that, you know, the Ukrainians and I mean, you can't say now the Iranians. I mean, every day it's going to be something, you know, Taiwan will be next.
Oh, God, as long as it's not the Welsh.
You can all go down in the mines
I don't
and
wanna go
survive.
back there and fight.
Right, I know. Anyway, it's really been a pleasure to talk to both of you. Thank you for your heroic efforts in actually getting here. It was an interesting day for both of them, but I'm glad that the time finally worked in our favor.
Yeah, me
She
too.
started this morning at 8 o'clock in Houston, sending me to my plane maintenance issue, no plane, you know, so.
But the time difference.
It's a
saved
2-hour
me because
time
it's
difference.
So confusing, Arizona.
No, it's not. We stay on the same time all year round. Everybody else is wrong.
Well, yeah, but it
No,
was
that's
confusing
it.
too. Okay,
We stay on mountain time all year long.
that does make sense.
Yeah, which
But
it,
why are you different from everybody else?
because we don't want it to stay daylight.
'Cause
If it's
hot.
114,
Okay, that
you
makes
really
sense.
want the
But
sun
it
to
was very
set.
confusing.
Yeah, so you're not interested in extra daylight if you live here.
But it was a really nice moment when I suddenly realized I got another extra,
Yeah.
extra hour. I'm gonna make it.
Yep, you did. So bravo.
May I tell the real reason I came here?
Sure.
I discovered last year that just down the road there's a place called the Cornish Pasty Restaurant.
Ah,
And I thought, I mean, I grew up on Cornish pasties, and I thought, this is going to be crap. I know it is. It was really good.
Excellent. So yeah,
Wow.
you can stroll right
Yeah,
over there.
so-
Have a better one in Tempe.
Really?
Yeah.
Same chain.
Oh.
but
I
they're
mean, I-
better.
I-
Wow.
Why are they
I
better?
altered my central balance. I had a really good one before I came.
He's probably not going to make it to Tempe, but
You never know.
all right, so why are they better? You brought it up.
Just, no, it's the same chain.
I
It's
know.
just better.
They have a bigger kitchen,
Ah.
bigger menu.
Oh, okay. I mean, because oftentimes your experience in a restaurant just depends on who's in the kitchen on that particular occasion. I mean, you know, there are some great restaurants that can really be awful on one occasion. You know, as a dishwasher guy was cooking or something. Yeah.
I have a little bit of an observation. Between the writers and the interpreters, you guys are really stimulating. It's great. And one of the things that I was reminded of was you talked about bolter. That's a call for an emergency on an aircraft carrier.
Oh, yes.
An airplane that
Oh.
can't catch the wire
Is it bolter?
is a
bolter.
Is it a bolter? I didn't know that. Thank
and,
you.
And my friends in East Sussex would say he done a runner.
Done a runner. Yeah. Yeah, done a runner.
Right, I know. Well, we are two people divided by a common language, as we often say, but I do think that there are some wonderful terms that probably a lot of people don't even know what they mean anymore. But, you know, language evolves.
I tell you, the English are wonderful at insulting you.
Yes.
Because they're so polite.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't even realize
One
you're
of the
being
biggest
insulted.
insults.
Excellent. Yeah,
That's pretty good.
excellent point.
You know, that someone will say, "Oh yes, Jim, he's very clever."
Yeah.
What an insult! It's like, yeah, missed. Nod your head.
Sure. Well, anyway, let's thank our authors. Round of applause, everybody. Thank you, virtual audience, for watching. And if you,
Yeah.
if you'd like to get your book signed and take photos, now's your chance. I'll just.
Cornish pasties on me next year. Okay.